Here I am again, guys. Today's lecture is on sexual differentiation as well. It's part 2, and it's the most interesting part because here's where we get into all the weird, trippy problems people have, where you're not just only a female or only a male. You're somewhere in the middle here, and that's why sometimes they use this word intersexed. Okay, I don't want to use the term hermaphrodite because, I don't know, it's kind of an old school term, and a lot of times it's not truly accurate. A true hermaphrodite has both ovarian and testicular tissue. Most of these cases are called pseudohermaphrodites. Okay, so there's 3 genetic abnormalities. They're very straightforward that I'm going to go through. And the first one, oh, forgot this part. Y'all remember this. XX is a girl and XY is a boy. So genetic abnormalities is going to mean this. Besides XX and XY, then we have like X, and we're going to have one that's XY, Y, and XXY. So you get all this other stuff. You don't have to write that down right now, but we're going to get into that right now. Okay, so the first one is called X0 females, and really you could just call it X because they don't have this second thing. They only have this X chromosome right here. So their label is female Y. If you remember the testosterone wash, well, they don't have a testosterone wash because they don't have a Y chromosome. And so their external parts look like a vagina, but their internal plumbing doesn't develop right because they don't have that extra X, and so all that stuff with the fallopian tubes and the uterus, etc., don't develop. So to remember it for the test, I call it the little girl syndrome because they don't ever kind of grow up, develop breasts, they don't menstruate, all this other stuff. So you can see here kind of some elements of it, how their arms are kind of elongated from here to here, also their feet. But the one hallmark of this whatever disorder, I'm trying to say the right word, is this webbed neck. And so right here you can see how she kind of has a webbed neck right here. Okay, I hope I did good on this first one. Now, the second one is more interesting than the first one to me because here you have extra genetic material. So if you're an XY, you remember that's a dude. But if I add an extra X, X is kind of girl material in a way. You know what I mean? I'm not being politically correct there, but here we go. These are labeled males. Why? Because they do have a Y and they do have a penis, but sometimes it's small and they're also sterile. The other thing is there's a lot of feminization of their body shapes. If you remember back to when I was talking about puberty and I talked about how girls have rounding and body contours due to estrogen, just look at this right here. To me, I don't want to be inappropriate, but that looks like a girl waist, right? And also his thighs down here kind of look more feminized, but up here he doesn't look feminized. And so he's caught in betwixt being a guy and a girl, not completely. Now this third one, you don't have to really remember, but anytime you have extra genetic material, a lot of times that's not good for you mentally speaking. Okay, so number 3, XYY. They also have extra genetic material, but here you have an extra Y. If a Y is what makes you a dude, so they're really dudely, right? And so look how tall this guy is towering above this other guy over here. And so if you look at these little things I have written down, of course they're males, they have, penis, everything works right. And there used to be a lot of research that, they're more likely to be aggressive and be, involved in violent crimes. And then it was debunked. And here's why. If you're really tall and commit a violent crime versus you're just an average height guy, you're more likely to get caught by the police because people go, oh, it was that really tall dude right over there. They can single you out really easy. Okay, I hope these first 3 made sense. The genetic disorders aren't nearly as interesting as the next section, which will be on the hormonal disorders. Okay, I'm fixing to go through 3 hormonal abnormalities, and they're all really interesting. So the first one, Adrenogenital Syndrome. That's a mouthful, but what does it mean? Well, it has to do with your adrenal glands and how it affects your genitals. So these people are genetically female. There's nothing wrong with their genetics, otherwise they would be in the previous section. But what happens is your adrenal glands do produce a little bit of androgens, testosterone. And so for these females, it masculinizes them. I don't know if you remember me talking about this. Remember when I was talking about the rats and how they line up in the uterus? And if you got a female here and there was a male here and a male here, that extra testosterone would masculinize her. Okay, it's kind of the same thing right here. And so this is one of my favorite pictures. I hope it's not inappropriate, but I love it. Because here it is, if you start to look at here, and when I keep using this word intersexed, they're in between sexes, right? And so right here, is that like scrotal tissue? Or is that really not a scrotum, that's the labia majora of a vagina? Same thing here. Is that like the shaft of a penis? Or is it really the labia minora? Is that a clitoris or is that the head of a penis? Now you see what I'm talking about, homologous structures. All these words are hard to say. But anyway, here you get this person that's truly caught in between. Sometimes it's called congenital adrenal hyperplasia. CAH. You don't have to remember that for the test. I just like this word better. Adrenogenital. How do your adrenal glands mess with your genitals? Okay. The next one, number 5, androgen insensitivity syndrome. This might be the best one of all of them. Okay, because these are males. If you're an XY, you're a male. Go back to Father Rocky. It's like, but they look like girls. Why? Because the cells in their body don't respond to testosterone. So you can give them all the testosterone wash you want to, but their cells go, I don't care. I'm not going to masculinize. So they feminize, and you tell me, if you look at this picture, is that a girl or a boy? It's a boy. I mean, come on, you know what I mean? And that's what's so weird. Are you with me right now? Because that's a boy, and so is that a boy. Technically, that's a boy. If we're going to look at their DNA, they're genetically a boy. But because of this hormonal screw up, now you can see how easily you could switch between the sexes intersexed. Okay, so one of the people I talk about is this boy. She's really a girl. I would go out with her. Does that make me gay for dating a boy? You know what I mean? Because it's just like, she's genetically right here, XY, but phenotypically, she looks like a girl. And so here's the other one I usually blow people's mind with. Let me show you this other guy you might know. Here he is. I mean, she is. You see what I mean? It's like Jamie Lee Curtis has this AIS, and we all identify with her as a girl. She has boobs, she has a vagina, but these people also, here's how they find it out. People always ask me this. I wish we were in class. When it comes time for their first period, they never have a first period. And they don't have underarm hair or pubic hair. Why? Because that's due to androgens, and their cells are insensitive to androgens. And so when they go up inside, they go, uh-oh, the internal plumbing is wrong. Okay, so I hope you like that section. I want to move on to the very last one. Okay, I saved the best for last. If you thought AIS was weird, this one's even crazier. So these are males. That means that they're XY. They're genetically okay, but something is wrong and they have an enzyme deficiency. I don't know why it only occurs in the Dominican Republic, probably because it's an isolated area. But anyway, this inhibits that testosterone wash that I've been talking about the whole time. You know how the testosterone wash goes on the undifferentiated tissue, and the same tissue down there in your nether regions can become a penis or a vagina. It's kind of like AIS, right? But not exactly, because inside, all of our parts are there. They just haven't fully formed yet. So at birth, they're misidentified as female. I mean, look at this little boy. If you ask me to identify from here up, I'm going to say a boy. From here down, I'm going to say a girl because that looks like a vagina. Now, if I can get all this writing off of here, at about 12 years old, then this secondary surge, 12 or 13, puberty, right, of testosterone that you get because your testes are up in there, all of a sudden makes their penis descend and their testicles descend, and all of a sudden they're a boy. It literally pushes it out of their body, this secondary push of testosterone. And so if you look at this guy at 19, or even if you look at him at 42, that's a perfectly normal guy. There's nothing wrong with his plumbing or anything. He's perfectly normal. But can you imagine if you lived your life from 1 till 12 as a little girl, and then one day you woke up and a penis pushed out of your body, and then all of a sudden you were a little boy and you just walk around, you're a boy now. And so you start as a girl over here. That's why they call it huevadoches, huevos, eggs, doches, 12, eggs at 12, balls at 12, and so now you become a boy. Okay, I just want to sum up the 6 that we just went through. So a lot of times people go, well, how common is this stuff? So here's the 3, again, genetic disorders. You can see that's not that uncommon in the United States. 1 in 2,000 females. We have a lot of people in the United States. That means it's really common. Same thing with Klinefelters, 1 in 1,000 births. That's very common. So I go back to Father Rocky. I don't mean to pick on him. I love him. I do, the rosary every night with him. But it's like there's not just a male and a female. Same thing with the super males, 1 in 1,000. I was like, wow. Now this one is really rare, that one that I talked about, and it's probably the closest to hermaphrodite, because remember, it's kind of like, is that a penis or a vagina? But most of these are pseudohermaphrodites because they don't have both ovarian and testicular tissue. Now, in the Dominican Republic, 1 in 90 men. That's really common to change from a girl to a boy at 12 years old. Okay, so the next section that I want to go through is called sexual dimorphism, 2 shapes. Well, basically, this whole time I've been talking about that little mound down there in the nether regions of how it can become a penis or a vagina, or the internal plumbing can become fallopian tubes and all this other stuff versus the stuff for a man. That was sexual dimorphism, but with the obvious thing, penis or vagina. But other parts of our body take different shapes too. The same undifferentiated tissue can go left or right depending upon if you're a male or a female. Now, some of these differences I'll talk about is like, do they look different structurally? Is it a different shape, bigger, smaller, whatever? And then it's like, why? Why is it different? Is functional. Okay, what does it do for men versus women to have this difference? Okay, so mainly what I'm going to focus in on is the brain. Okay, and so different parts of the brain, you go, my brain is just like a girl's brain or a boy's. No, boys' brains and girls' brains are different. That's just not me just making up bullshit. Okay, so the first thing that we know about the brain is that men have a little bit bigger brains than women. And this reminds me of Borat. It's scientific fact, it's proof. You know what I mean? I'm glad that Borat 2 is coming out. Y'all probably don't like Borat as much as I do. I love Borat. Okay, so when he's telling those 3 ladies, this whole fact, but the thing is, yeah, it's true, but when you account for body size, men are a little bit bigger, so it's proportion of their body. You know what I mean? And so when you look at body size, their brain weight is exactly identical. Okay, so we can throw that out the window. There's no differences. It's in the size of men's brains versus women's brains. Okay, if you had me for introduction to psychology, some of the next stuff better make sense. Okay, so if we look at our brain, I'm looking at it from above. If I look at the top of a person's head and look down in there, it kind of looks like this. And so there's 2 different hemispheres. You can notice this little, area right in here that divides the left hemisphere from the right hemisphere. Now, the other thing I usually talk about in intro class is how the hemispheres are, cross-wired. Contralateral. So when I use my right hand right here to do this, it's really my left brain that's doing it. And when I do this with my left hand, it's really my right brain that's controlling it. I don't know why we're cross-wired, but that's just the way we are. Now, if I were to shave the top part of your brain off and peer down into it, you would see this other piece down in here, this little piece, and it has all these fibers that are emanating from it. Now, if you have me for intro, you better remember this piece because it's the first piece that I taught you about the brain, corpus callosum. And the corpus callosum is like a bridge. This is how I'm teaching it now. It's like a bridge between the two halves. And you have this bridge for communication across both halves. Why? Well, think about an athlete. If you're an athlete, your right foot better talk to your left foot because they need to have a coordinated effort. And so why the fuck am I making a big deal about the bridge and, your two hemispheres and this, that, and the other? What does this have to do with gender? Well, when they've done investigation of males versus females in this bridge, that females have a much more elaborate bridge than men. And this picture might not make a lot of sense, but if you look at males' activity, it tends to be isolated to one side or the other, but not a lot of cross communication this way. And if you look at a female's brain, it's the opposite. If I can get kind of an orangey pen, there's a lot more cooperation across this way. The other reason they know that the bridge is different for men and women is when people have brain damage on the same exact place, females recover faster or are more likely to recover. Why? Because they can grab stuff from that other side to make up for the lag on one side because they have a more sophisticated bridge. I hope I made sense in that section. Okay, another thing that they've investigated about the brain is called hemispheric specialization. Okay, that's a mouthful as well. What does this really mean? We have the left and the right hemispheres, and they're specialized to do different things. Now, if you were in my intro class, you better remember some of this as well. The left hemisphere is designed to do verbal and language abilities. It's not the only thing it does, but we know this from brain damage research, PET scans, all kinds of other research. The right hemisphere is more involved with mental imagery, spatial abilities. Like I'm big on first-person shooters and like cognitive maps and being able to orient yourself in an environment. And so I'm not saying that this is always true, but we'll get to research later on that suggests that girls are better at this, verbal and language abilities, and boys are better at mathematical, physical, mechanical kind of abilities. And it's not sexist, it's not that it's always true, but maybe we were designed to do different things, and that's why the androgen wash affects men's brains the way it does and doesn't affect women's brains. Now, we look at this kind of, language, versus, whatever mathematical abilities. During this testosterone wash, the idea is that it masculinizes your brain, which it does. This is not me just making something up. So girls, when you try to understand men, even though there's this popular book, it's probably true. Men's brains are not like your brains, and vice versa, guys. Your brain's not like a girl's brain, so you're trying to understand a girl with your dude brain. And so we'll talk about this in more detail a little bit later on. But Gershwin and Galiberta did this famous study in the 80s in which they found evidence that men were lopsided. They had a little bit bigger right hemispheres than left hemispheres. And so their idea was that during the testosterone wash, it kind of encouraged the growth on the right side and it depressed the left side a little bit, whereas women, because they don't have a testosterone wash, they don't have a lopsided brain and it's more even, and that might be the reason that the bridge is better in women's brain than in men's brains. Okay, I have two additional differences that I wanted to address between the brains of men and the brains of women. So far, I've been teaching from the top down when I talked about the two hemispheres and the bridge or the corpus callosum and how that stuff worked. Now what I want to do is switch gears, but to do that, I want to teach from the side view. And if I talk about the side view, this is known as the sagittal view for you nursing students or medical students. And now you should remember this down in here because I just taught you about it when I talked about your endocrine system on last time. Now the endocrine system is controlled, if you remember, by the hypothalamus right here and the pituitary right here. Now if I get all that drawing off of here, here's a real brain and you can actually see right here is the hypothalamus. Pituitary looks like it's been cut off on this one. Okay, so if I look at this area right in here, the hypothalamus, remember I told you it has a lot of different thermostats in there? And so one of the ones that they've looked at is right here, or this one right over here. I'm going to focus on this right here, the preoptic area. And so the preoptic area, what do they call that? Well, your eyeball would be over here, and your eyeball's cord, the optic nerve runs right by it. And so when they look at this preoptic area between men and women, it's significantly different. Whether it's humans, songbirds, rats, that's why I have this bird on here. And as they look at this, they find that it's 2.5 times bigger for men or males than it is for females. And so this is relevant to sexual behavior and also gender identity, researchers believe, especially sexual appetite and initiation of sexual contact, because if they destroy this area, then males no longer have any interest or appetite in sex. And you think, well, why is it 2.5 times larger for men than women? Well, think from an evolutionary perspective. You need to propagate the species. If men are just uninterested in sex, then you won't get any, propagation of the species. And so I don't want to go all evolutionary right here, but that's maybe what it has a lot to do with. Why do I have songbirds on here? Because it has a lot to do with their repertoire, which we're going to learn about next time. If I have a larger repertoire of songs to sing, I have a greater ability to attract a mate and have babies. Now, if you look in rats right here, you can see a picture. It's not the best picture, but the preoptic area is about 2.5 times larger for male rat than it is for a female rat. Now, this last area I wanted to go into also has to do with the hypothalamus, but not up in here where the preoptic area was, more right here where this anterior commissure is. So I think I have an arrow. Yeah, I do. Anterior commissure. So now I'm going to look at the hypothalamus, but look at the back of the brain, or should have done this way. I get confused on the computer. So if I look in here, like there's this little area called the INAH3 that they've investigated. And so back in the 1990s, 1991, Anton LaVey published a very controversial study in which he showed that this area is twice as large in straight men as it is in gay men and women. It's like, you mean the brains of gay people are different than the brains of straight people? Wow, that throws a monkey wrench into it. I don't want to go to the brains of transgender people, but we could totally throw a monkey wrench into it right there. So I want to go off on this because this is biological foundation or evidence of sexual orientation. You didn't learn to be that way. You had a gay brain from the beginning. You had a straight brain from the beginning. That's what I want to ask straight people. When did you decide to become straight? So your brain is organized differently under the influences of the things that I've been talking about. I hope I made sense. I will see y'all next time.